Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Trial Talk Live. My name is Claire Leduc, and I'll be your moderator today. And Belinda Beethoven will monitor your questions. It's easy, you just have to put them in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we hopefully Nancy will answer all your questions. Today's presentation is by Nancy McDonald, and the title is September in the Garden. To say that September is Nancy's favorite month is an understatement. Relief from the summer heat brings opportunities to both enjoy and improve her garden, and she's happy to share some of these September activities. So up to you, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Claire, and I'm happy to be here today. Maybe when you heard the words opportunities in the garden, you're thinking, well, that sounds like work possibly. But I want to remind you too to take the time to enjoy your September and October gardens, because we often get blooms that are very unique to this time of year, like the colchicum autumnal that's there, the heptacodium, maybe your toad lily. So definitely take time to enjoy your garden, take time to continue to enjoy your harvest as well. But now is the time that you can actually do some of those things to beautify your garden and to nourish your garden. And that's what we're going to concentrate on today. Beautifying your garden probably starts with a bit of honesty and doing a bit of a survey, maybe taking that cup of tea or coffee, going through a stroll in your garden and trying to envision what your spring garden was like, what your summer garden was like, how things look now, and asking yourself, well, what worked, what didn't, what bloomed for you, what didn't, what grew for you, what didn't. Were there gaps? Were there times in your garden when you didn't have the bloom or the color and you were a bit disappointed with how things looked? And what is totally overgrown? And I should also mention in here, did you have some problems with some diseases in your garden this year as well? We've had a lot of high humidity days, and that's certainly contributed to a lot of fungal diseases. So ask yourself all those questions. And I'm hoping that maybe you have a bit of a gardening journal. And if you don't have one, now is a good time to have one. Because some of the plants that you're looking at now in your survey may be in bloom, and you know you don't want to dig them up and maybe divide them this time of year, but you can make a note for yourself for what you want to do in the spring. So you've done that survey. So things that you can do then, you can get into those perennial borders and renovate. Dividing and transplanting perennials. And this is a wonderful time of year right until the end of September to do that kind of thing. And planting trees and shrubs. And I always remind people that if you're planting any trees, any shrubs, any perennials, divisions, all of those new plantings will take extra attention with watering right until freeze up. So it's best to do before, as I said, the end of September. And this is perfect because you really are seeing your plant at probably the maximum growth, the maturity that's happened this year right now. You can make accurate decisions. You can visualize height and also the color. So things that you do make some decisions on what you want to do in the garden. Sadly, perennials do not live forever, and just dividing them and is actually an opportunity to really rejuvenate them. So we're going to talk about some like the iris here or daylilies. If you're not getting the bloom maybe that you were expecting, it might mean that they need to be divided. Garden Making, this is an older magazine, and sadly they don't publish anymore, but a few years ago they wrote one on renewing your garden bed, and they talked about lifting all plants every 5 to 6 years, giving the opportunity to improve the soil, divide plants, replant. Now, A lot of plants you can lift that often, but obviously if you have plants that put down deep tap roots like your Baptisia, it's one that wants to stay in place, but many others can be divided. Renovating may mean removing. Maybe you're noticing that you have a bit of a garden thug in one of your plants or a bully that's invading other spaces. Then, maybe it's time to get it out of your garden. And then also renovating may mean moving to a more suitable location. You planted a perennial a few years ago in a full sunny spot, but now everything's grown up around it and you're not getting the bloom that you were expecting. And so just moving it now to a sun location may give it better opportunity to do what it wants to do. It's a real economic thing too, to shop in your backyard. I don't know about you, but when I go to a plant store, even though all the advice is to plant perennials in 3s or 5s or those odd numbers for being more attractive in your landscape, most times I'm just buying one at a time just for the cost and so forth. So having the opportunity then to divide it and to move that perennial around is going to be very satisfying for your eye. It really entices you to move through your garden if you're seeing the same flowers, the same colors throughout your garden. It's very satisfying. So that repetition is a good thing, and you have the opportunity to do that from your backyard. When to divide, Fine Gardening said that when it looks really good, when the plant looks really good, it may be time to divide it. And of course, if you're going to divide a plant, you want to take as large a root ball as you can. So starting out from the drip line. Always cool weather and overcast days are perfect days for dividing. I usually have a bucket of water with me when I'm dividing if I'm not going to be able to get it into the ground right away. So I can actually put my roots in there. And after I put my plant in place and I filled in the soil, that's when I would add the organic matter around the planting area. A lot of planting information will say to add organic matter to the planting hole, but we know that that's not a good idea. It's better to put the organic matter around the planting hole itself. Use good vigorous sections. And if the plant is in bloom, then I will cut off the bloom if I have to move it at that time, because I want all the energy of the plant to go into the roots and establishing. Keep the healthy divisions, spread them out, and I often let the roots, when I put them in the planting hole, be my guide for positioning. We get a lot of questions about peonies. Maybe the peonies didn't bloom and people need to move them to a more sunny location. And actually, this is the perfect time of year in the fall, in September, to transplant peonies, if that's what you have to do. They're very long-lived plants, but over time, sometimes the crown of the plant can get woody, and that will just result in sparse growth. So that would be a reason to divide it. And before you dig, a good tip is maybe with a marker just to draw a line on the stem at the soil level so you know how deep to replant. If you plant your peony too deep, you will decrease the blooms. And all the associations will show you this diagram that the eyes of the peony, which are right here, are 2 inches below soil level. And when you're cutting and making your division, I dig up the entire clump, and then the divisions would be one that would have about 4 or 5 of those eyes to give me a healthy clump. Another plant that we're often dividing are the bearded iris. And so there's a little diagram here of the bearded iris. And you can actually transplant those or divide them and transplant them. They actually suggest that you would lift and divide them about every 3 to 5 years. And you can start doing that in August as well, but certainly you can do it this time of year. And a little bit of care with the bearded iris is that you need to have the rhizome exposed, so it's at the surface. So when I am planting, when I'm digging up, I will really look at the plant that I'm digging up, making sure that there's no disease. Iris borer is something I'm always looking for. So I'm looking to see that I'm digging up a healthy clump. And if everything's healthy, I can even plant in the same area again. I will want to have a piece of the rhizome, and I'll with each division, I'll want to have maybe about 3 fans at least on the top here, and I'll want to have some rootlets. And an easy way to keep that rhizome at the soil level is just at the surface level, is just to dig your hole, make a little hill in the center, and put the rhizome on top of that, and then fill in your soil. If you have beardless type of irises like Siberian iris, it's a good time to look and see, is the center of that clump getting bare? It's telling you that it's a time to divide it as well, or it's becoming quite crowded. And you certainly don't have to dig up the Siberian irises. It's not recommended as frequently as the bearded ones. Lots of plant sales going on. There's lots of fall bargains. And those container plants, they can be planted right into October. Having said that, when you get one of these plants at home, you probably find that there's lots of roots in that pot, in the bottom of the pot, maybe encircling the pot, maybe coming out the bottom of the pot. And so it's very important to do something we call root washing. So when we get the plant out of the pot, we want to try to get rid of all that container soil. We want to tease out those roots as much as we can. So it takes a bit of time. I usually do it with a bucket of water and change it a few times as I'm doing this. I often have to sacrifice some of the matted roots at the bottom, but I get a good amount of free roots. And then when I put those roots into the planting hole, they have a best opportunity of establishing themselves. Anytime I transplant any or plant any new plants in the fall, I certainly make a note to myself that once the ground freezes, and it's a heavy freeze, I'm going to add some extra mulch around those plants. I want to try to prevent any frost heave from happening in the winter. So just another reason to have that journal and make a few notes to yourself. So many of us take plants outside for the summer, and then we want to take them back in for the winter. September is a great time to start thinking about taking them in, and we want to take them in without any hitchhikers. So like the hibiscus here, I will be taking in my rosemary, bay plants. I'll take cuttings of other plants. But first of all, I want to make sure I'm not bringing anything in. So insecticidal soap I will use for plants like fuchsias and pelargoniums, for things like whiteflies. Hibiscus and palms are spider mites like them. So I want to use insecticidal soap there. If I see any evidence of mealybugs, then it means I have to have a leaf by leaf clean with the insecticidal soap. If I see scale, I can use insecticidal soap if it's in the crawling stage, because insecticidal soap can go right on that insect at that time. However, if they're not moving and they're really slow to move, you really have to examine for that. Then you can use rubbing alcohol on a cotton swab. But I must say, unless it is a very important, almost an emotional connection to that plant, if I see that it has a heavy infestation of scale, I'm going to be discarding it. It's just not worth my time and effort. I often, most times, I will repot into fresh potting soil. So that helps to eliminate some of the soil insects that might be there. But you can immerse the pot in a large tub of insecticidal soap for half an hour, because I know anytime I move a pot on my patio, there's always a scurry of activity from what's underneath. So it helps to get rid of those. And when I bring that plant in, I will isolate it from indoor plants. Now that insecticidal soap regime for these plants, I'm going to start probably in the first week of September is my usual plan. I'll do that first spray. I'll wait 5 to 7 days. I'll do a second spray. I'll wait 5 to 7 days and I'll do another spray. So it's 3 times that I actually will spray with the insecticidal soap. So you can also do some activities in the fall to nourish your lawns. I have a small lawn that I share with a neighbor. Usually about the middle of September, I will overseed. You can top dress. Some people put compost on, others might apply some fall fertilizer. If you've had grub damage, many of the products will now tell you that you can do an application in the fall, so check for that. And weeds, if you have some time, it's cooler out there, if you can pull some of those weeds. I think it came from about the 1800s, this proverb. It's even in the Oxford Dictionary of Proverbs. 1 year's seeding makes 7 years weeding. So if you can get rid of some of those weeds now, not let them go to flower or anything and seed, it will help you going down the road. Adding compost and manure to the gardens, I usually wait till about October, but you can start thinking about that. The fall is a wonderful time to add that extra organic matter to our gardens. And then during the winter, the freeze and the thaw cycle will help to take it down into the garden bed. Activities also to do in September to beautify would be to plant spring blooming bulbs. And if you're really smart about it, and many people are, you can start with very early bulbs, mid-spring, late spring. You can get almost 3 months of bloom activity from bulbs. Daffodils and hyacinths, it's good to put those in the ground by the end of September or the latest Thanksgiving. Tulips, as long as you can dig the soil, you can put them in. We always get asked as master gardeners, how do you deter the squirrels? Some people put down chicken wire. Some people, I have had good luck with pelleted chicken manure. I know not everyone has, but I do put that around when I plant my bulbs. Some people use blood meal. Some people might say, well, I'm going to plant a fritillaria close where the tulips are because the squirrels don't like the odor of that bulb. But it's wonderful to see these spring beauties. And then don't forget to continue to harvest. Enjoy whatever you have in vegetables that are still coming for you. I just put this in a reminder here for herbs. Herbs are pretty expensive to buy. So if you have some bounty in your garden, herbs or edible flowers that you can harvest for the winter use. I think almost anything green in an herb can be made into a pesto. You can freeze, you can dry. Last year, I even dried nasturtium leaves because they're edible, and I used them in some soups in the winter. So yeah, harvest those things. And what I'm going to close on is not to forget to collect seeds. September is a great opportunity as well to collect those favorites from maybe your annuals or whatever. This is my Cosmic Orange Cosmos. You can see the seeds right here that I'll be collecting. These are 4 o'clock seeds. I also collect seeds from calendula, marigolds. So it is a wonderful time to collect seeds. And now we're ready if there's any questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Nancy. That was actually very inspiring, and our work is not yet done, plainly. We have a couple of questions. So the first one is from Sandra, and she asks, how do you know if your iris is a bearded iris?
Oh, well, it's very definite. You will have that big rhizome on a bearded iris. Certainly your Siberian, they have narrower leaves too, as well, like the Siberian ones. So I think just Google that, but the rhizome will look like that. And if you look at the roots of the Siberian, they're not nowhere's like that. They don't look like that at all.
Okay. I think it's Willie asks, do you root wash all perennials you buy at a nursery? Maybe to get rid of the passengers there too.
I root wash, and that came up a few years ago, I think, from the garden professor's website, talking about root washing for trees, for shrubs. The container soil is completely different from our garden soil. And if you leave a lot of that container soil around the plant, what happens is the roots continue to probably just go around that container soil, and they don't spread out into the planting hole. So they never really get well established. And they showed even some experiments if that they would go maybe a year or so later and sort of push on a tree, and it would be loose, because it hadn't been root washed, and the roots had not established.
Okay, here's a question from the very appropriately named Iris, and she says, do the seeds have to be dried on the plant before gathering, or can they be dried indoors?
For gathering seeds, so for the cosmic or cosmos, they're pretty dry, but when I take them in, I usually put them out even on a cotton tea towel to make sure there isn't any moisture before I put them into a package. So you can tell that they're ready, because of the browning and that. And it's very easy to Google your particular one if you're not sure what that seed should look like. But then when I take it in, I probably leave it for a few days out on that cotton or linen tea towel, just to make sure it's nice and dry, that there's no moisture going into the seed package.
Okay, and I actually have a question about the root washing as well, which was, if you do that, do you add the mycorrhizal powder to the soil or to the plant or to the roots afterwards to re-encourage that relationship with the fungus in the soil?
I haven't. There's really been mixed reviews from my reading. I did get it at one time, and then I did some reading, like, how would you know the specific mycorrhiza for your soil or for that plant? And so once I did some more reading, I thought, I know some people swear by it, but I've stopped doing that. Yeah.
You stopped doing that one. And then I was also wondering, when I was doing advice tables, I heard quite a few people saying their tomato crops were late this year, and I would say mine were also late. So how do you deal with the tomatoes that are going to fruit late? How much time have we got left for them to produce fruit? I know we can bring them in as green, but can they ripen during September?
Well, you'll just be watching the weather like the rest of us, right?
Yes.
Because, it's really hard to know. I mean, it's been so hot. It looks like we're going to be more seasonal temperatures next week. So that's good. Yes, I keep them out there as long as I can, is usually the temperatures. But yes, then I will bring them in, let them ripen indoors. This was a really hard year on tomatoes. Most of the Facebook pages I'm seeing, people are showing blight and nasty looking leaves and different fungal diseases. And, we just had quite the weather.
Yes, the ones the squirrels don't get in the first place as well. So is there a sort of a prescribed frost date that, in spring we all say you're safe after May 24th? Is there a sort of like expect frost by such and such a date?
I think, to me, it seems like it's around, it is around Thanksgiving. I think on some of our notes, whether we have October 6th or the 11th, are two dates that are in my mind. So there's just but we can certainly get it before then, just like we can get a June frost, right?
Mm.
So,
yeah, okay. And so when you're now about the perennials, when you're cutting down perennials, you leave some seed heads on, I imagine, for the birds and so on. But there's been a change in approach now between cutting very low and sort of halfway down the stem and leaving some of the material around on the ground. Do you have any advice on that sort of thing to do?
I do try to leave as much as I can still standing, especially with the seed heads. Having said that, I mentioned in the talk a little bit about if you had a lot of fungal disease, and you know, maybe a powdery mildew or whatever. And then I'm probably going to cut down more, and I'm going to clean up all those leaves and not let them stay there. And that's another reason for renovating too in your garden, is to maybe you need some space because you need to increase the airflow of you know, your phlox or your peonies or your a bee balm, or some of them that are prone to powdery mildew and fungal disease, just to give a better airflow through.
Yes, I guess that makes a lot of sense. And then I have one other question for you. When you're gathering seeds, do you keep them over winter in the fridge or just dry and out and open, or in their plastic packets?
Yeah, I actually bought one of those little coin envelopes, I guess, a whole bunch, I think years ago. I think there was 500 in the box, so little brown envelopes. And so these don't need, the ones that I don't put anything in the fridge or freezer or anything if it doesn't need cold stratification, you know. So most of the ones I'm planting are fine just to go out. So yeah, I mean, some people, they really save a lot of seeds. I save a few annuals, and I can just keep them until I'm ready to plant them next year.
Right. And then you use the same sort of approach with things like gladioli bulbs and dahliacorns and that sort of
Well,
thing?
I didn't even get into those because usually it's in October that you're going to be thinking of those. You usually have the frost that's going to kill down your dahlia, you know, the leaves and that, and you leave it. So we have some excellent presentations on YouTube from last year from Candace Dressler on bulbs.
Okay. And then there's one more question. If
it was spring and also in the fall.
Okay, just one last question from Iris again. How to treat slugs that cause holes in the hosta bed? She's heard about dried eggshells, and are the slugs killed over the winter? And if not, how does she kill them?
I'm telling you, they're not easy to deal with if you have a lot, and they don't like the dry weather. Eggshells really don't do anything for them. I sometimes say if you don't have a big bed, go out at nighttime and just pick them. It may sound a little icky, but you can do that. Some people do the sardine or you know, salmon can, a little can, and put some beer or something in, and you know, hopefully they fall in. But just to make sure that's what you have. So that's why going out at night and looking is good, because sometimes it might even be earwigs that are doing that, and you could control those in a different way. So if you know you have slugs, there's, you know, hand picking at nighttime, or there's you know, trying to drown them in some way.
Okay. Do we have time for one more question, Claire?
Maybe one more question, Belinda.
Okay. A squirrel question. They're eating all of Sandra's peppers and tomatillos, and she's already put out water for them.
Yeah, I know. I wonder, I have put around that chicken pellet manure. I've done that around all my seedlings, anything. And, you know, one planting I did not too long ago, I forgot to put it around. I came up the next day and the 3 plants were dug up. And so I put them back in, and I put the chicken pellets. So I know it doesn't work for everyone, but it certainly worked for me. Other than that, it has to be some sort of barrier that they can't get through, some sort of physical barrier. They seem to be very, very frisky and active this year, the squirrels.
They do. All right. I think that's it for the questions. So I'll hand you back to Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy, for a very, very informative presentation as usual. That was wonderful. And thank you, Belinda, for monitoring the questions. We would like to invite you to next, and thank you everyone for attending. We'd like to invite you next week for another presentation called Cold Frame for a Longer Season. And this is with Odette McIntyre, and it promises to be another very interesting session. So again, thank you everyone for attending and for the presentation.